Okay, I'm Kaylin Franklin, and this is Jake Ryan, and we did our project on contracts.
I'm Jake Ryan.
So, basic contract principles, it contains four different components. So, the first one is agreement, which is an offer and acceptance. The offer is between subjects or between two parties, a subject, the time and place, and a price. Then the acceptance is a signature, and it can either be written or verbal. The second part is a consideration, which is the exchange of something of value. And capacity is the comprehension of the contract's terms. And then the fourth one is legality. So, with contracts, there's two types of contracts. The first one is bilateral. So, this is with sports teams. The only person involved is the promiser. And then in a unilateral one, it's prize money to the winner. So, this involves a promiser and a promisee. And then to have a void contract, it means neither party is obligated to perform. And then a voidable contract is when one party has the option of canceling the agreement. So that would be a minor, has always has a choice to get out of an agreement if they want to. So then a breaching contract, the first type is minor. So it's when one party substantially performs most of its duties under the agreement. Then the other is material, and that's when one party either fails to perform its duties under the contract or its performance was so inferior that it destroys the original intent of the agreement.
So our case we did was O'Bannon versus the NCAA. It basically plays into amateurism and the role EA Sports played, the video game producer of NCAA basketball every year, which is no longer in effect these days. But I grew up playing it, so I kind of had a little interest in this case too because it kind of played into what you saw and played and kind of made sense why Ed O'Bannon, former UCLA basketball star, was suing along with other players that I'll get into later in this presentation. We're suing EA Sports for depicting they abbreviated it as NIL, name, image, and likeness. And they were depicting that without his consent, without his prior knowledge, and kind of going against what the NCAA allows for that, since they're making massive profits off of portraying Ed O'Bannon, for instance, for UCLA, or Michael Jordan back in the day with North Carolina, kind of making them known in the video game without them getting paid per the amateurism rule in NCAA. So first, I'll kind of explain what amateurism is, how it's defined. It's practicing of an event, usually in sport, without being compensated. So this plays directly into this case, essentially. So like I said, EA Sports created these players on the video game who looked identical, and then they used their same jersey number that they actually wore in real life without consent, so that way they were identifiable to the purchaser of the game, and they'd select their favorite team, whether it was UCLA and they were a fan of Ed O'Bannon. Their EA Sports is obviously profiting off the purchasers buying their game and without the player's consent. So like I said, there's other plaintiffs that were kind of getting into the mix once they heard about this. Sam Keller, who used to be a quarterback for Nebraska, not Nebraska, Arizona State, and then he transferred to Nebraska during the same time period, roughly as Ed O'Bannon was suing. With college football was another issue in their EA Sports video game they had. They did this, like I said, growing up I played these games, so I used to play with my favorite teams, Michigan Wolverines and the Gophers and all that, and I would know the players' numbers, and they would look identical to an extent. So it kind of hit home for me in this case. So like I said, they sued for the NIL and not being compensated against Section 1 of our Sherman Act and the right of publicity statutes, and then many common law issues that I've kind of laid out here. Basically, they looked into class certification in two ways: if it was granted or if it wasn't granted. So, if class certification was granted, the plaintiffs could sue for injunctive relief for likeness of use and illegal use. And then, if class certification was denied, each individual athlete was to file their own claim against the NCAA. So that would mean every player that was looking into it would have to essentially go through the same process that Ed O'Bannon was going through, rather than if class certification was granted, they could define it as a class together and kind of conjoin with each other and pursue it together, so they had a better case. They were also players current and former of this time frame were also suing for broad class. An injunctive relief would allow these players to pursue damages against EA Sports with using their likeness and basically broadcasting their celebrity and stardom. This went along with current and former FBS football bowl subdivision, Division I football players, and then Division I basketball players. They were suing for past damages along with this case, and it was more to this case kind of they really wanted to hit home and control the epidemic of pay-for-play scenario and kind of keep the ropes tidy on it, because if the players did in fact win this case and suing EA Sports, it would kind of open the floodgates essentially to this big problem of pay-for-play and how these athletes just produce millions and millions of dollars in revenue for companies, these universities, and that obviously is another topic down the road. But inevitably, the NCAA, both parties kind of won. It was kind of a win-win. More for the NCAA, I would say, because they ended up not having to compensate for the $1 billion damage that was potentially in place for them to pay out and buy out, or these players to cash in. But the players, since they didn't win that's a little bit of a loss, obviously, but they also did win because they were individually allowed to still pursue this case and getting the rule changed through College Licensing Committee, or CLC, with commonality of damages, so to prove basically that this was happening along the ways. And inevitably they did win, because now they don't even make a college football video game anymore or a college basketball video game anymore. They have to wait until they're in the professional leagues, to like your games like 2K Sports and all that, or MLB The Show, that kind of thing. So the players in a sense, did win. Kind of going off that, key takeaways from it, I mean, I don't think this issue is ever going to go away, to a sense. You see it firsthand this year with college basketball. Zion Williamson for the Duke Blue Devils, he's kind of like the up-and-coming rising star and he's only 18, 19 years old for 1 year, and he had so much media attention the entire year. You could have a team go 30-0, but it didn't matter if Duke had one loss. They could have one win, and still everything was on Zion. And basically, they're just making all these huge profits off him, and they're already talking. He hasn't even got drafted to the NBA yet, but they're already talking about all the shoe deals he's going to potentially have, or he's going to have. It's just whether it's going to be record-setting, which everybody claims it's going to be. And he's just one instance of this. So I think, even though the video game's not there, NCAA is still kind of just making just dumb amounts of money in the background, and these players aren't profiting off it, so it just plays into the amateurism and the pay-for-play role. So personally, I don't think it'll ever go away. I don't know how Kaylin feels on it, but...
Yeah, I saw something when the tournament was going on, how, I don't remember what game it was, but I don't know if it was ESPN, but someone literally had a camera, like, following him, like, his entire... I don't know which game it was, but they had a camera following him, like, that entire day. So I think... I don't know if that is something that's okay to do, just because obviously they're going to be making money off of the video that it creates, but he's going to be making money soon enough anyway, so, I mean, you don't really see him complaining about it. I think it's more of like the athletes that don't have as big of names that complain about like not making money, but that's part of being a student athlete too, is obviously school comes first. So yeah, like I said, people will make money eventually, but yeah, I don't see this issue ever going away either. So
yeah, I definitely think this case just kind of shed a lot of light onto the corruption. I would say maybe isn't the correct word, but to an extent it is, for how much these kids bring to the table, and how many businesses and companies can profit off it. NCAA is basically a business for these athletes, but that's why you're seeing all these violations coming up nowadays with pay-for-play scenarios, or pay them to come to your school behind the scenes now 2 years after they're done, or even in season, with DeAndre Ayton from Arizona last year and his head coach were suspended during the tournament right before the tournament, because of how much money he was getting paid to play there. So I just think it ties in, and I don't think it's ever going to go away. And that's just one sport, and college football is basically the same way in a sense. But these laws where they have to come and play in college, it's kind of where they need to draw the line and figure out if it's worth them to go, or dealing with all these potential compensations the NCAA or these companies will have to deal with. But this O'Bannon case versus the NCAA is definitely one of the big ones that kind of opened a lot of eyes, I think. But
Okay, that's all we have. Thank you.